This episode of The Candid Frame is brought to you by the Charcoal Book Club. Their carefully curated selections reflect the best in contemporary photography, all for a reasonable price. And they're delivered directly to your doorstep each month. They offer free shipping to the US, Canada, and the UK. It's subsidized elsewhere. It's a great way to begin or expand your photo library. Join the club at charcoalbookclub.com today, and remember to use the code TheCandidFrame at checkout and receive a 10% discount on your first membership payment. We also have the support of Frames Magazine. It's a quarterly publication that showcases the work of many of the best in contemporary photography, including Steve McCurry, Martin Parr, and Amy Vitale. Each issue is beautifully printed and thoughtfully curated by its editors. It's a wonderful way to discover and be inspired by great photography. Subscribe today and use the promo code TheCandidFrame to enjoy a 10% discount on your monthly and yearly subscription when you visit readframes.com/join. Personal projects are one of the ways that photographers develop their voice and their style. By focusing on a particular subject matter, theme, or idea, a photographer encourages us to see things through their eyes. The results can reveal something new or challenge us to reconsider our assumptions or beliefs. The work can show us the history of a time and a place, resulting in a historic document whose importance goes way beyond nostalgia. Harvey Stein has been photographing Coney Island in New York for decades. He began photographing Coney Island long after its peak at the turn of the 20th century. Yet it still possessed a unique quality that has always made it a quintessential part of New York life. Coney Island People, 50 Years is the third in a series of books he has produced on the beach community, focusing on what continues to make the destination so special for New Yorkers, tourists, and photographers. This is Ibadian X, and welcome back to The Candid Frame.
Okay, well.
But how's your?
I've been well. The book came out. It was delayed by 3 or 4 months, so it's supposed to come out in May, and it came out September 1st because of the shipping delays. Really. It was the peak of the shipping delays in the LA port, or Long Island, not Long Beach port, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And it seems to be doing well. I mean, yeah, and I'm going to India for my first overseas workshop since COVID.
Have you taught workshop in India before?
Oh, yeah, I've done 5 or 6. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm a veteran in India now. I have to count, but I think 5 or this will be probably my 6th one.
Where?
Mostly in Rajasthan, but I did one in Kerala, which is way southeast, I think. Fascinating area of India. So this time we're going to Delhi, which is not in Rajasthan. I guess it is. I'm not sure. We're going to Agra, Varanasi all the time. It's the most incredible city in the world, I think, in some way. It's the holiest city of India. It's on the Ganges, and it's where people bathe in the dirty waters and where they cremate people in public on the shores of the river. And then we're going to a new city called Lucknow that I've never been to, but it's 8 million people and supposed to be pretty terrific. So we'll see.
What fascinates you about photographing in India?
Well, the people. I mean, that's what I do. My workshops are about the people. The colors, the smells, the food. The people are really open to being photographed. They're curious about us. They want to photograph us being Western people. It's noisy, it's poor, it's rich. It's so full of contrasts and crazy. I mean, people going to the bathroom on the streets, getting their haircuts on the streets. Everything's in public.
Yeah, that's one of the appeals that towns or cities where
Mhm.
life happens on the street.
Right.
So much about what happens, especially here in Los Angeles and probably any sort of big city, is that so much of life happens
Absolutely.
within the context of four walls.
Right.
And in terms of, people being out on their porches or, sharing experiences on their street, on their street corner, or on a town square, a lot of that stuff is gone. Even in the small towns that I visited, Walmarts and things like that
Oh, yeah.
have destroyed like small communities where people on the weekends would hang out in the town square, and
Yeah.
it's only like in foreign countries that sometimes you sort of experience that.
You'll get that in Mexico for sure. I went to Mexico. I have a book on Mexico. I think you know that. Maybe we did an
Yeah.
interview about it. And I love Mexico because of the families and the parks and on the streets and the town squares and the old men. India's like that also. Not that they have town squares that I can remember seeing. It's not like organized that way, but they're just out. They're just out. I mean, they live in shacks, and the ghettos are accessible. We can go into the ghetto and walk around and shoot. Bombay, has 2 million people in their ghetto, and they have schools, they have lawyers, they have shops. It's not like a ghetto that we would think of. I mean, they have a university, they have dentists, but you can walk where they live, and it's like really poor, really poor.
Mm.
But these people like it, and they live there, and it's their city. They don't even go out of the ghetto. It's not like a ghetto that we have, I don't think, but it's very poor. I love the spirit of the Indians. I mean, they're really upbeat. They have a can-do attitude. Nothing's too difficult for them, and their favorite phrase is "no problem, no problem." Like
They share that with the Jamaicans.
Oh yeah,
No problem, man.
yeah, exactly. They overpromise, of course. So from my guides to my agent, who I work with there, it's like crazy. But I don't know. It's just fun. Everything's on the street. Any food, we don't eat street food because you'll get sick. There's no question about that. Or drink the water, just, bottled water. You have to be careful. The danger is you getting sick from what you're going to eat or drink, not that you're going to ever get mugged or attacked or anything. They're gentle, really, I think. Maybe not to their own women on the streets, from what we hear, but otherwise, yeah. It's a fascinating. And there's so many languages, there's so many religions and costumes that go with the religion. There's the Jains. I'm not even sure what they are. There's like 20, 30 religions, different sects, and different villages that, just have a certain kind of group of people. We try to go to a lot of villages to see really how they live. So it's amazing. It's an amazing. You've not been there?
No, I've not been there yet,
Yeah.
but hopefully I will be.
Go. I say there's two kinds of people in the world: those that have been to India and those that haven't. And I would really recommend it. I mean, it's amazing. And you can be in the cities. You don't have to go into the villages to see all this crazy stuff. It's in the cities also, where old ways of life and living. And the cities are huge. The main cities are huge. Mumbai, I think, is 20 million, 24 million. New Delhi is about 20 million, 22 million. And then Kerala is a southern state. It's totally communistic. Their government is a communist government. You see posters of Che Guevara and red the flag of communism, and it's 100% educated. Everyone there gets an education, maybe through high school. So it's very literate. Every state is different. And I haven't even gone to the north, in the Himalayas. I'm not really, or Punjab, northern places we really haven't gone to, real northern places.
What would you say are some of the surprising similarities with respect to photographing people between your experiences in India and what you've had in Coney Island for the last 50 years?
Wherever I go, and I've gone to lots of places now, I mean, with my workshops or on my own, people are the same. People are the same. They have the same values. I mean, they may not have the same amount of money or education, wealth, but they want to be safe. They want to eat, have food. They need a little bit of money. The similarities, they like being photographed. Even in Coney Island, people like being photographed. They're out on a fun day for themselves. They're not uptight. They're away from the jobs. They're in a beach area that's full of music from the amusements. There's amusements. There's the beach. There's fishing. There's the pier. There's swimming. There's the boardwalk. There's the amusements and the rides. And India's like that. To me, it's like an amusement park in a way. I've never thought of it quite like that in India, with the
That's
colors, lots of music, the noise, a lot of noise, street noise, the smells. It's sort of, similar in that way. Maybe that's why I love both of them. India is definitely my most favorite country to go to, no question.
I like places like Coney Island. We have Venice Beach out here, which bears some similarities to that. And, what you've described in terms of all the different activities that happen at these locations, these people from all these disparate communities, class, race, cultures that just come together to just have fun. And you see a certain level of exuberance and people sort of shaking off pretensions and being themselves in ways they would never be elsewhere. There's been a rise over the last decade of these sort of fake public squares that are commercially owned. I don't know to what extent you have them in New York, but we have several here in Los Angeles where they make it seem like it's a town square, but it's all about commerce and, stores and restaurants.
Right.
And there's nothing about people letting their hair down or having like fun. It's about going to these places, walking around, sort of people watching. But there's something about locations like Coney Island and Venice Beach where there's an unpredictability. Right. There's a certain sort of wildness to it that I think is really fascinating and really speaks to the need for people to be able to express themselves and to be within a community.
There's an edge to Coney Island. I wouldn't say it's a wildness, but there's an edge, and there's a funkiness, and that's what attracts me. And it's the same thing with India. There's a funkiness to India, however you might define funkiness. There's people in India, people aren't having fun. The poor people, some of them, they're really working hard 12 hours a day for $2 a day wage, So I don't know that they're all having fun for sure. It's the poverty rate there is staggering. But I think, the emphasis on family is large there and helping each other. So the camaraderie and the family aspect of India, as well as Mexico. I'm sure you've been to Mexico quite a bit. I find the families really, family life is much more, at least on the street, is more important than what I see here.
But families is like, for example, when we were coming up, our family would go to Venice. Actually, we would go to Santa Monica, and we would do I think, I forget how long the distance is. I think it's less than 3 miles. And we, as a family, would walk, back and forth. And that was a fun and a fond memory that I have of going out there and walking the boardwalk.
Right.
And I see a lot of families going out there to sort of, just enjoy being out. And that's a big part of the Coney Island experience, I would imagine, because in reading, doing a variety of different reading about the place, it's a place that people who grew up with it frequently bring back their kids. Yeah, they love coming back. Yeah, and they want to make a part of their the things that they share with the kids. Yeah.
But when I first started shooting in Coney Island, 1970, it was 70s and the 80s. It was a dangerous place to go. It was decaying. The rides were not very good. They were old and they were disappearing. There was a lot of empty lots. Guard dogs behind fences barking at you if you walked by. Even on the boardwalk, areas were empty. It was a lot of emptiness. It was like a wasteland and unsafe at night. So I rarely would go there at night. But you're right. I know a lot of people who grew up in Brooklyn and would go there with their dad or their family, even then, or in the 60s and 70s. And then they say that they bring back their own kids. But Coney Island only has become a family destination in the last 10 years from being really down in the dumps. And the difference between Coney Island and the squares that you're mentioning is that Coney Island has a history. I mean, it's been around since 1850, where your new squares. And I think maybe you mean also like a shopping area, shopping center.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I actually was in LA last year for Thanksgiving. We were in Dana Point in South, and we came up for the day with some people, and we went to a place. It had a huge Christmas tree. The Grove, is that what it's called?
The Grove, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that? Yeah, I liked it, but it was all stores and restaurants, and they had a trolley and they had Santa and all that, and this was Thanksgiving, and that reminded me of like a little amusement park with stores, but it just probably was there for the last 5 or 10 years. I don't know. As opposed to Coney Island being there nearly, 150, 1850, 1950, nearly 170 years or so. So, big difference. Coney Island for me is very authentic, and that's what draws me to it also. It's very real. It's poor people, middle-class people. You don't see a lot of rich people. You don't know if people are rich there or not because you're not dressed when you go there. I mean, well.
Exactly.
And it's black, it's Hispanic, it's Jewish, it's white, it's Asian. So it's like a melting pot. And it has been ever since its inception.
I was doing a good amount of reading about the history of Coney Island because I've only been there once.
Oh, really?
And it was really fascinating to see the history and how it began and how it was sort of a counterpoint to Brighton Beach, which was sort of a beach destination for the more affluent. And that this Coney Island sort of started taking shape as an alternative to that kind of welcomed the working class, especially immigrants who were living in New York, and how it got, you had 3 amusement parks in there, that it was a phenom in terms of what was created there, in terms of commercially, in terms of the rides and the events and how it's social dynamics. It was, it was as celebrated as it might have been. It was also known as, Sodom by the Shore.
Right.
Because they had a brothel there, they had pickpockets, they had, all the things that people probably were concerned with during the 70s. kind of existed there even from the beginning.
Absolutely. They had an elephant thing there. But actually, Coney Island, its first inception, only rich people went there because it was so far away.
Mm.
You needed a coach or something to get there. But when they put in they put in a train, and then the subway in 1904 probably reached there, or a little later, and that's what brought the masses in. By the teens, 1915, in that time, then it became really opened up to the masses, and with these different theme parks, Luna Park. There were 3 major parks, and they kept burning down and then rebuilding.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of issues. Things falling down into the sea. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there then, actually. And a lot of entertainers. I mean, Al Jolson, Jimmy Durante, all these. I mean, in the 20s and 30s, the heyday really was the teens in the 20s and 30s, I guess. And then after World War II, it started falling apart. And then there was alternate entertainments, like TV started, and radio and movies. So it went downhill pretty quickly in the 50s and 60s. And I got there in 1970, and it was still, what I liked about it was that it was decaying, and I liked that atmosphere. It wasn't a bright, airy family area. It was lots of characters and poor people and areas of decay that I was kind of drawn to, actually. Yeah. So, and then in the 90s, Giuliani and then Bloomberg, after Giuliani, put money into it and rescued it. And in 2008, they tore down the park that was there, and in another year they put in a whole new amusement park built by an Italian amusement company, and it's still there now. And they upgraded, all the rides were new and different. And so since 2010, it's had a remarkable resurgence.
It's a location that has always celebrated eccentricity.
Yes.
Especially the characters.
And freedom. Freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. But tell me about that, because I know you're drawn to people, and since there's no shortage of characters on Coney Island, tell me about the experience of creating images of characters and just people in general.
Yeah. So one thing before I do that, now it's getting gentrified to finish that historical line, and families are back and pushing out the characters. So for me, it's a mixed bag. There's new high rises being built around in the neighborhoods of Coney Island. It doesn't affect the boardwalk, but it affects the kind of people that are coming there now. People with their families, and it's a bit less interesting. So the characters are being pushed away. So I would, I would gravitate to these people who looked unusual. They could be poor, but they're not like vagrants or anything, or they're not homeless. You don't see homeless people there, which is interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Homeless people don't hang out there for some reason. I'm not sure why they wouldn't. So that could be at Coney Island, that I'd be attracted to people who look different, dress differently, behave differently, not psychotic, but rather maybe they're speaking, reciting poetry, singing, dancing. There's a lot of bands out there that are Puerto Rican bands. It's still very ethnic. So people start dancing on the boardwalk. And then they're drinking a little bit, not booze so much, and eating and wearing some outrageous clothes. So those are the kinds of people I might be attracted to. I also look for the light. if they're in great light. I mean, I do photograph. I photograph events, like I'm going to the polar bear swim on January 1st. That's going to draw 3,000 swimmers into the water on January 1st. So it's freezing. It's for fundraising. It's for charity. And there's a group called it's a polar bear Coney Island Swim Club. It was originated it started in 1903, and it's the oldest swim club in America. They go in the water from November to the middle of April, and then they're not around in the summer because it's too warm. So I photograph them, and they're great because they go in the water and then they come out and they're all red and they're freezing, but they've never said no to being photographed. So that happens every Sunday at 1:00, and I'm usually there a couple times a month, maybe. In the winter, there's so much to shoot. There's bands, there's weddings, there's models there. A lot of models being shot, so I horn in on that maybe. And there's ordinary people. Like I like old people. And it might be a group of old men sitting on a bench, and I'll go up to them. There might be a Mexican family on the beach. I have a photo in my book of a Mexican, maybe 20 Mexicans on the beach. It's one of my favorite photographs that I took in 1980 or 82, and I just discovered it. And they're sitting, and they're sort of arranged in a circle, and I'm right in the middle shooting them. Or a group of teenagers on the beach acting out, and I'll go up to them, and they'll act out even more when I point the camera, So there's just endless life there. And there's crowds. I sort of don't like July and August there because of the crowds. Makes it harder to shoot in a way because I like I like to get close with my wide angle lens and fill up the frame with them and have a background that gives us the sense of the place, like a ride in the background. Even if I'm on the beach shooting and we're 300 yards away from the Wonder Wheel, I want the Wonder Wheel in the photograph to say where we are. Not that we would know. We wouldn't know anyway. I don't know. I think it's a combination of these characters. There was a guy named Captain Bob who would be in a sailor suit, older man, and he would give tours. He's gone now. He's gone. There's a guy named Eddie who was on the pier every time I would go there. He's gone now. I mean, there's a lot of old timers that sort of probably just leave or pass away. I mean, I don't know. I've been going there since 1970, so it's like 52 years. I don't know. There's something always different there. And often I'm bored, like, I've seen this, I've done this. But I'm assured that every time I go there, I'll find something new to shoot. And I like that. There might be a new ride. Something might burn down, and then there's an empty lot, and then next year there's a new ride. Or there's a change in the configuration. I mean, it's like building blocks. There's no real there's not many buildings there. I mean, other than back in the neighborhood behind it. So it can change very quickly I would say from year to year.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned is you use a wide angle lens, and since the beginning you've been using a 21 millimeter lens with your Leica, and it's a focal length that really demands that you work close,
absolutely,
with your subjects. So you engage with your subject. It's not like you're making the majority of your images surreptitiously. Talk to me about why you started with the 21 millimeter lens and how you've learned to engage with people in order to make the photographs work.
Sure. So I've told this story before. I had my first teacher in 1971 or 2, and then I started teaching for him after that. Ben Fernandez, I don't know if you know him, or his name. He's getting lost in history. He passed away last year. He, Hispanic American. He lived in Spanish Harlem. 6'4", 6'3", big guy, little overweight, huge man, big voice. So he was my first teacher, and he was a major street photography in the 70s. He photographed Martin Luther King. He photographed that movement. He did a book on King. And he said to me in a class that I took with him, get a Leica, get a 21 millimeter lens, and go to Coney Island. So being the good little student that I was, I did all those things, and I still am doing it, you know. And I went there with this lens, and I started using it, and I took to it right away. So now my long lens is a 35 millimeter. I never use a telephoto lens. I use a 21 on one of my Leicas and a 35 on the other. I shoot 80% film, and 90% of the film is shot with a 21 millimeter lens. And you're right, you have to get close to make a meaningful image. And I just saw my picture. My photos weren't so good when I was far away, and I just kept pushing myself to get close and engage with the people that I'm photographing. I don't photograph candidly if I can help it. I always, I do some candids, especially if I'm in a foreign country and I don't know the language and I can't go up to people. But even in Mexico, I know a little Spanish. I would nod and shake my head, and they would nod, and we'd communicate with body language. I want to engage my subject because I think, and two things I ask them: look into the lens, not to look at me, but look into the lens, which is looking at me in essence, and don't smile. So I want to control even on the street, and I think I'm atypical from most street photographers because I do this. Most street photography is candid work. I don't like candid work. I think I don't feel clean when I'm doing that. It's like I'm sneaking. I'm not giving them the chance to participate, perhaps, or to say no if they really don't want to be photographed. So I started going up to people and going in with a compliment. Oh, I like your tattoo on your shirt, on your sleeve, on your arm. I like your hat. I like your blouse. I like the red color of your shirt. Meanwhile, I have black and white film in the camera, you know. So, but I try to be genuine and honest about why I'm going up to them. I'm not going to say I like the wrinkles on your face, but I'll say you look great in that light. And that usually disarms people. I compliment them, and it usually disarms them enough for me to work with them for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And I want them to acknowledge my presence, that I'm here on this earth also, and that we have a little bit of a dialogue. I've made friends doing this. I met my ex-wife in Central Park, going up to her and photographing her as a stranger. We started talking. This was in the 70s when I was young and cute. And we started talking. And I said, wow, do you want a photograph? And she said, yeah, okay. I said, okay, give me your number. I got her number, and one thing led to another. And we got married a couple of years after that. Didn't last forever, but it was okay while it lasted. So, I like people. I want to feel connected to people. I'm not looking to make friends or to find wives or anything, but it's lonely walking around all day, not speaking to anyone and just shooting. So I try to go up to people who I think I would be interested in because of what they're wearing, because of what they're doing, maybe because of how they're behaving, and try to photograph them. So I get refused a lot, but I try to go up to them without being threatening. I'm not jumping on them. I'm getting close. I'm speaking to them. They see my camera, And depending where we are, I'm more or less successful. I mean, in Mexico, probably 50% of the people say yes. Manhattan, the same. Brooklyn, 75% of the people will say yes. India, 99% of the people will say yes. I was in China in 2019. Everyone said yes, and they hold their fingers up, which I don't want. So that was a problem. And I was shooting. I shot the Macy Day Parade here in New York. The clowns and the people in costume for the parade. I got into the parade route before the parade started, and they're all smiling and happy. So I shoot them smiling, and I will photograph anyone smiling, and then I'll ask them, "Can you be serious?" I think a smile is phony. It's for the camera. It's not who they are, and it softens the picture. I want a hard, tough gaze if I can get it.
Yeah.
Even angry to make and I want eyes into the lens, because that personally engages me, and I think would engage the viewer, that there's a tripod set up between the photographer, the subject, and the viewer, and it pulls people in more who are viewing the photograph if there's a direct eye contact with the subject. I might be wrong. I'm sure this can be debated. Or a demure look down or up might be attractive or aesthetically nicer than a direct gaze, which could be a little harsh. But I think that's phony too. Looking down, looking up, smiling. I tried to be as authentic as possible with my work.
The recent flood in the studio forced me to move my book collection out of harm's way, and thankfully none of them were damaged. But a good thing that came from it is that it gave me an excuse to go through some of them again. It was great to feel like I had discovered the work for the very first time. And because I have changed so much as a person and as a photographer, I saw some of this work with new eyes and a different appreciation. That's the magic of any book, but especially photo books. I can return to them again and again and never tire what I find. Camera equipment will come and go, but a great monograph will stay with me forever. That's why I'm such a fan and a supporter of the Charcoal Book Club. They help photographers get their books into the hands of people who will enjoy and treasure their work. There is no better source of inspiration than a bookshelf with exceptional and quality work. It's why I believe you should become a Charcoal Book Club member today. With your membership, you get a quality monograph each month. Each of these has been carefully curated and selected. The books reflect the diversity of genres, photographers, and styles, all of which you'll appreciate and enjoy. And if you don't like that month's selection, you can choose an alternative book of equal value in their catalog. They offer free shipping in the US, Canada, and the UK. It's subsidized elsewhere. Sign up today and use the promo code TheCandidFrame at checkout to enjoy 10% off your first membership payment. Another great way to enjoy a regular dose of inspiration is a subscription to Frames Magazine, a publication dedicated to showcasing exceptional photography. Published quarterly, the magazine is printed on high-quality paper, and the images by photographers like Martin Parr and Amy Vitale are rendered beautifully. It is a magazine that encourages you to stop and linger on an image rather than absently swiping past it like you would on your phone or tablet. Enjoy what they have to offer by subscribing today and use the promo code TheCandidFrame to enjoy a 10% discount on your monthly and yearly subscription when you visit readframes.com/join. I see a lot of photographs that people take of strangers on the street, the street portrait. But what I'm hoping to see is something genuine that comes across.
A connection.
Yeah, a connection. And oftentimes the thing that makes the picture is something really subtle. It could just be
Absolutely.
the lilt of the held or what they're doing with their hands.
Right.
So when you're composing the photograph, when you're looking at the subject, besides that, that intensity that you just mentioned, talk to me about the eye for that subtle gesture or expression that, especially from experience, can make the shot exceptional.
I'm not saying I get it all the time or half the time even. I mean, I don't pose people. I don't, other than telling them to look into the lens and don't smile after maybe they've smiled. By the way, kids understand this. I tell kids, be serious. I don't say don't smile. I never say don't do this, don't do it. Can you be serious now? We photographed you smiling. Can you be serious? And a lot of people start laughing because that's not easy for them to do. I want hands in my photographs if I can get them. I usually shoot from waist up, horizontally, 3 feet away. I'm not interested in the legs usually or the feet, maybe the posture, but you can get the posture from waist up. And if they're holding something, a cigarette, their glasses in the hand, they're talking with their hands, I'll try to shoot that. I like gestures. If they put their hand up and say no, I'd say, great, I love that. And they get pissed because they don't want me to photograph. And I photograph it. And if they cover their hand, great. That's a strong emotion. That's a strong gesture. So I go for that. Once in a while I'll say, can you put your hand, like if they cross their arms, that's a tough look, but I like fingers. So could you drop your hands or put a hand here if you want to put your hands up? That subtle gesture, it happens so fast I can't say I'm an expert at getting it, but if I do get it and I look at the film, I can recognize that it's working or it's good. I like photographing people with food, eating, maybe not so much with a stuffed mouth, or an eye is half closed, an eye is open and one is closed. I love sunglasses because that adds some visual quality and maybe a mystery about people. I did during COVID in my neighborhood, for a year and a half, I photographed only people with masks walking around, and I would approach them, mostly all approached. And that was hard because people didn't want to talk to you during COVID, even on the street particularly. I found the masks intriguing, the variety of masks, the shields, and how it changed, must be changing them, and making them more anonymous. That's a hard question to answer with the exact pose. I will ask people to stand on one foot sometimes. When they do that, the foot that they're standing on, their shoulder goes down, and the other shoulder goes up. I rather not have shoulders straight on and even, so the head is straight up and down and the shoulders are across so that you get a cross-like feeling to the head and shoulders. I want a shoulder turned a little bit, weight on one foot so one shoulder is higher, a turn, semi-profile, or directly. And I mean, it really depends. It really depends. It's hard to say. I try to be intuitive. I work intuitively and quickly. I don't want to bother people too much. I have a friend, Ethel. She can sit on a bench meeting a stranger and talking to that person for a half an hour. I say, Ethel, let's go. Come on. And but she gets good images. So everyone works differently. I don't copy anyone. I try to be myself. Be your own self. Don't shoot like anyone else. Shoot like you shoot. And hone that, become an expert in the way you photograph. And then maybe someday people will start following you. I love street photography because it's always an adventure. It's always a challenge. I think the hardest thing to do in photography is to photograph strangers on the street not candidly, but when they're aware of you, when they know they're being photographed, and to get them to cooperate. I think it's easy to do candid photography because you're just laying back. You're not revealing yourself and you're not risking anything. I feel I'm risking something going up to people. I've never been attacked. I've been yelled at. I've been told to fuck off. But I know I push a little bit, but I mean, I'm not a Bruce Gilden that is attacking people 2 feet away with a flash. I say thank you, and I try to be kind. And, a lot of people enjoy it. I go in with the assumption that they're going to say yes, enjoy it, and that, hey, it's my work. It's how I work, and I'm making art. I'm never trying to trash anyone or make them look bad. And I'm doing something important, at least for me, and that gives me the courage, I guess. Often I don't have the courage and I go buy something, and I don't know why I do that. It's hard to be always up with the camera on the street.
Yeah.
It really is. You do street photography, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the majority of stuff that I do, so I completely relate.
Do you go up to people at all, or do you do
more
camp? Yeah.
No, I kind of go back and forth. For me,
I do too.
When I choose to do a portrait do a street portrait, I feel like it's more than the person looking like a character to me, because in LA you got no shortage of people who look interesting, because unlike probably other parts of the country, there's a high degree of self-awareness in terms of how people dress and how they compose themselves. So there's some people who I see who are obviously dressing themselves and composing themselves because they want to be seen. And those aren't the people that I tend to gravitate to make a photograph. I'll look at them and I'll appreciate them for what they look like or what they're doing. But I'm looking for something where something just inside of me just resonates. Usually it's kind of ordinary people, but that I see something that I find extraordinary. And and for me, it's just what attracts me also when it comes to my general street photography. There's a certain sense of the mundane that draws me, and then when I see it a little differently, it really excites me in terms of making a photograph of that scene. And the same applies for the people that I choose to make a portrait of. It's the very same thing.
Good.
One of the things you talked about earlier was the fact that, especially after going out for so long, you can get boring because it's like, there's a sameness to them. But, a lot of what you've been doing over the last couple of decades is producing these books. And one of the things you've talked about is the idea of going out and thinking about themes.
Right.
In context of what you're eventually going to be doing with the images in a layout and in the book. Talk to me more about the idea of going out with themes in mind. And if you can give me some examples, that'd be great.
Sure. I mean, from almost day one, I've worked on what everyone would call a long-term photographic project. So my first book was Identical Twins. And so I would go out. I got that idea from seeing identical twins on the street. I remember in May of 1972, I met 3 sets of twins on the street in one weekend. I shot them, photographed them, I stopped them. I liked the way they looked, and I liked what I got, and that gave me the idea to do more. So one thing is I get my ideas and my themes from my work. Things pop up. Like now I'm in New York, so I'm photographing people in their cars, standing outside their cars. I don't know if it's ever going to amount to anything. I'm not going out every day looking only for that. I might have 3 or 4 themes going on at one time. The walker in the city. New York is a pedestrian city. So for years, I've been photographing people walking. Those are candid. And sometimes I meet someone and I'll say, could you walk for me, or could we walk together, and I'll photograph you. So that's a mostly candid deal. How they walk, where they're walking, what's in the background. So I'm finding themes as I go by being out and photographing. One obvious theme, of course, was Coney Island. And that's a theme in of itself, because it's there. It's a neighborhood. It's an area, and I can keep going there. And I could be on the beach all day and just shoot that. There's different areas there. I think having a theme when you go out energizes you, gives you motivation, and gives you something concrete to work on and to maybe turn into an article, a magazine article, or something for a podcast, or eventually a book. For me, the best I could do is to make a book. I mean, to me, that's the climax. That's the peak, doing books. I could have a show. That's great. I could have an article published. I can have some photos published. A book. So for a book, you need 100 photographs. You need 150 photographs. You need 80 photographs. So I have to keep making photographs on that theme. The book can't just be your 100 best photographs unless you're famous. Publishers want stories, photo stories, I think. And we want to do photo stories. So the themes are important to me as a way of getting my work out, and as a way of feeling committed, and that I'm onto something, that I'm saying something. I say that anyone can take a great photograph here and there, give a camera to a chimp and teach him how to click the shutter, and he or she is going to make a good image sooner or later, you know. Putting work together on a theme in a coherent way, to me, is the mark of a more advanced photographer. I mean, how advanced is another issue. Saying something about our world, contributing, talking about how you see and what you see in a meaningful way. So the isolated photograph here and there doesn't do anything for me. So I want to work on a theme over a period of time. So my books have been 50 years, 40 years, 23 years, 6 years, 6 years, in the making, in the shooting, and the making, I guess. The making is another year. To me, themes and long-term projects and doing books are what I'm about. And that's how I've structured. I mean, I didn't plan that. I don't know any other way of working, probably, you know? So I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, that does. That does. So in line with that, when you sit down and begin working on a project that you're conceptualizing as a book, how do you begin in terms of your selection? Are you making prints and then laying them out, putting them on a board? Are you using the computer? In terms of just like the initial gestation of the book, how do you work?
Well, so I have an idea, and I'm photographing twins, and it goes slowly, because how often do you see only identical twins, because that's how I know they're twins, dressed alike. So I have 3 photos. I make prints. Then I have another year goes by. I have 8 photos that I like. I've met some twins. I get involved in the twin community a little bit. I went to a twin convention to photograph twins. So it grows. So what I do is I use prints. I make 8 by 10 prints in the darkroom, all black and white. My books, I've done 10 books. 7 of them are black and white, and 3 are color. Two are color, maybe. 1 Coney Island. I think 3 are color. So with the black and white, I make prints and I lay them out, the images, and I might have 10 photographs. Then I have 20, and then I have 30. So I have to get a bigger and bigger table or whatever. And then I lay them out and sequence them as soon as I know I'm onto something, or as soon as I know it's a project. And then I come back from another, like even Coney Island. I come back from a shoot, I make prints, I have 10 new images. I lay out what I have already, and then where do these 10 go? I try to put them in a sequence, and this one's like that one already in the sequence. It's better. I'm going to put that in and take that other one and take that one out. So I edit and I sequence as I go, as I shoot. That's the best way. You can't shoot and for 10 years and say, okay, you can do this. I'm going to do a book, and you have 200 prints, let's say, finally done, and then start sequencing. You can do it, but it's much better to do it as early as possible, because you know it, and you start sequencing, and the sequence gives you information. It tells you what you have too much of. It tells you that you don't have too many of this part of what you want to say, and you better go out and shoot for that. It tells you where to shoot. It tells you what's missing, and it tells you how good it is in a way. And if what you have in your mind is coming out in your photographs. So that's really important. It's a good question. I'll go out, like I went to the Macy parade. Well, I don't shoot. I shoot parades, not the parade. I didn't even go into the parade. I did the peripheral, the 2 hours, 3 hours before the parade started, or while the parade was going on. There was still lots of people at the beginning of the parade. I didn't have much in mind there other than a good shoot, interesting photographs. I might be doing portraits of people, probably in costume. I haven't even developed the film yet. I will go to different events looking for certain things, and other times I'll just take the camera and go in the park or go up on Broadway in my neighborhood and start shooting. And half the time I'll get something that might fit into a current project. I have 3 or 4 or 5 projects going at once. Some might have 10 or 15 images, some might have 30 images. So I rarely go and say I'm going to look for one thing by going out today, and that'll be it. My antenna is up, hopefully, 360 degrees from wherever I walk, looking for a variety of stuff. Anything that interests me and shoot. I have lots of individual photographs that I print and I like, but I don't think I'll ever do anything with. It doesn't fit into any of the projects that I really want to see get the light of day.
One of the things I've been doing is thinking about process, not so much the mechanics of making the photograph, but in terms of answering the question of why am I making the photographs? Because, I love making photographs. That's always sort of the easy answer. But I think there's some deeper things. And one of the things I've been thinking about for me was that I felt that the camera and the creating pictures gave me a voice that people would listen to. And you write something really interesting in the early part of your book, and I wanted to read this and have you sort of expand on it. You say, photography takes me beyond myself, yet paradoxically plunges me deeply into myself and instructs me about the world and about who I am. It gives me direction and purpose. It is my shrink, my antidepressant, and my salvation. It scratches my creative and expressive urges. I truly believe that it has saved my life by giving me permission to be myself. And I love that last line about giving you permission to be yourself. And I really would love to hear you talk more about what that means.
Oh, that's beautiful. Did I write that? Holy shit.
Yeah. You did.
I wrote that. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I was going to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, according to my parents. Graduating high school, I'm going to college. So I didn't want to be a doctor or educated as a doctor because I don't like the sight of blood. I mean, this is like teenage thinking. I'm not a lawyer because I get nervous getting up in front of the class and reciting in high school. So what's left? An engineer. Okay, so I went to Carnegie Mellon in engineering, and by the third year, I mean that's how I made it my life's choice. By the third year, I loved my humanities classes and didn't like my science and engineering classes. I graduated as an engineer, a metallurgical engineer. I went in Pittsburgh. I went to Bethlehem, PA, the other side of the state, and worked for the Bethlehem Steel Company. This is in the middle 60s. And then I went into the Army. I was in Germany for 2 years as a second lieutenant because I took ROTC. This is a long... And I got a camera for the first time ever. And there happened to be on the base a darkroom. So I had free time. There was no war going on, thankfully. And I spent time in the darkroom, came to New York, went to Columbia, got a master's degree in business, an MBA, worked in the business world in New York, in marketing and advertising on Madison Avenue. But all the while taking pictures because I had this camera from Germany, a Zeiss Icon Contaflex. And then I said, what am I doing working? I want to be an artist, you know. And I tried to write. I did ceramics. I painted. And I wasn't very good at any. But I had this camera. And I'm in New York, and it's so visual. This is in 1968, 1969, 70. And I love the street. I love the faces on the subway. And I said, okay, I'm going to try photography. So I bounced, you know, from ages 21 to 34, I moved 20 times. I was bouncing around like most young people, unsure of what they wanted to do. The camera gave me stability and gave me eventually an identity. It gave me a reason to go out. Like taking a walk for me is boring. Yeah, whether it's down Madison Avenue or Broadway or in the park. But if I have a camera, I have a reason to be there. And I found, even when I was in the Army, I had this camera. I photographed my men working. I did some portraits. I was terrible. I did scenics. I traveled to Italy and Yugoslavia and all this and did scenics. But that camera seemed to be my friend. So I say it saved my life because I was rootless in a way. And the camera settled me down. And for the first time, I really was doing what I liked. You know, I didn't like engineering. I didn't love graduate school. I didn't like working in I worked in a couple corporations in sales and marketing. And I worked for other people. I didn't like that. So the camera gave me a reason to go out, I guess is the best way I can say it. And a way to be committed and a way to meet people. I didn't, you know, and a way to be an artist. So it fulfilled everything that I didn't have in a way. And that's why I say it saved my life. And I remember I had a girlfriend or I broke up. I was depressed. How do I get out of my depression? Pick up the camera and go to the pier along the water. I lived in Greenwich Village and photograph on a nice day. You know, I had friends and all that too, but the camera was my friend also. So, and I was kind of shy and probably still am. It gives you another reason for being. And for me, it just grew into the reason for being in a way. And my wife accuses me of putting that first in our relationship. And I say, no, no, no. She's there at the door listening. and sometimes she's probably right, you know?
Yeah, I've had that conversation with my wife as well.
Yeah,
so you're not alone.
It takes you away from the family, you know, or you bring them with you, but they get bored and they say, okay, let's do this. What are you doing? Come on. So not that I threw myself into it, I just got into it. And then I started teaching at ICP early on. I've taught there now every year since 1976, except for 1 year. I love teaching. So I have an identity as a teacher, as a photographer, curator. I swore that I would be happy in my adult life. My dad was a shoe salesman and managed a shoe store, retail store. He never was happy. He would always complain coming home, all the work he had to do and how physical it was. I said, I don't want that. I want to find something that I love to do. So it took me maybe 7 or 8 years after college to find that. I had lots of jobs in my 20s in different situations, and I found the camera, and it saved my life. And I've never been unhappy doing what I do. I mean, I know I have tons of students, they stop photographing after 3 years, after 5 years. They quit after 10 years. They get discouraged. I've never gotten discouraged. I've always enjoyed it. To me, it's not a business, and I feel blessed and lucky. And like, I shouldn't be so happy in what work I'm doing. It's unfair because 90% of adults don't like what they're doing, or at least when I was growing up. Maybe not so much now. People are doing what they like now. And I tell my students, quit your job that you hate and do what you really love, because we're only here for a short time. And why waste a third of your life in an office or in a job that you despise just because
Amen.
You can go on a vacation for a week in the summer because you have to make money to eat. That's important. Find ways to make money that aren't oppressive and that can support you without you committing robberies or mayhem or murder. You can do it. You can do it. There's no question. And I did it. So.
Well, my last question, which I ask each guest, is that I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone, good. Someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
Yeah, that's a very easy question for me to answer. Margarita Mavromichalis. She's an amazing photographer. To me, the best photographer that I know. She's Greek. She lives in Tokyo now. I love the fact that she's never lived a day in her life in one spot more than 4 years. I met her here in New York. She was a student of mine at ICP in 2011, and since then she's grown amazingly. She has a really good Instagram account. It's Tita, Tita _ Mavro, Mavro. She's a world traveler, and she's an exceptional photographer, street photographer, both candid and what I would call approaching people. She moves people around. People love her. She's amazing. She's quick. She's incisive. I'd love you to interview her someday. I really would.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to sit down and talk with you.
It's great. Great. Thank you.
Thanks to Harvey for joining us. Find out more about Harvey and his work by visiting harveysteinphoto.com. If you're hearing this episode before February 18th and you are in the Los Angeles area, I encourage you to sign up for Chris Buck's The Surprising Portrait Workshop. This 3-day workshop is the first that Chris has conducted here in Los Angeles, and in it, he will share how he created iconic portraits of people like Nick Offerman, Steve Martin, Gillian Anderson, and Barack Obama. Find out more and sign up by visiting chrisbuck.com. And if you're a fan of our show, you can write reviews on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts and share a favorite episode on social networks, be it Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Please use the hashtag #TheCandidFrame. You can also support us financially by contributing via PayPal or Patreon. Thanks to MB and Laurie Sandler for their recent contributions. And if you can't find every episode of the show on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts, download the Candid Frame app, available for Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.